everybody, I'm Summer Bach. Welcome to my kitchen. So we've got a ton of ferments here, as you can see, and I am going to talk about each one of them with you. We've got some time here on Facebook Live, and let's see, where am I going to start? Let's start here. This one's pretty awesome. Oh, and we even have that one in the pantry that, we'll grab that one in a second. Oh, it's here. Oh, yay, it made it. Okay, cool. So let me show you what we have here. This is carrots. These are wasabi carrot pickles. They're whole pickles, whole carrots. I actually did, peeled them. So I left the little tops on. So let me show you one. I took one out a little while ago and was eating it. Oh my gosh, this is where I ate it. It was a whole carrot before I devoured. But I left the little tops on, and I just thought that that was a really cool way of making it presentable and kind of gourmet. Because I pictured either cutting this in fourths or halves, or keeping it whole and putting it on a plate when I was serving a meal. You know, be fancy if I have guests and things like that. But this is amazing. I've had these going for about November, 3 months now. So they've been fermenting for 3 months. And I have to say that at this point, at the 3-month mark, I do think they've gotten tastier. They're a little more sour. They're crunchy, but still have like this really cool texture. So, you know, I actually think that a little bit longer. I tried them after about a month and they weren't quite at the delicious point that they are now. Like, I can't wait to see how they keep going. But I put whole green onions in here, and I put cloves of garlic. And it's really, really delicious flavor, and it's just creating kind of my own pickling spice, essentially. Let's see, what's next? I'm just going to show you everything that's on this table right now, because there's a lot of interesting little guys floating around. So this is a coriander sauerkraut. And this one's actually going to be featured in the new book that's getting published sometime this year. And it's a book called, let's see, what's it called? Find Your True Fork. And so it's by the people that put on Wanderlust. And I have a whole chapter in there on fermentation and recipes and how to do it. So this is one of the recipes that I added to that book. So you'll get a chance to learn exactly how to make this, which I'm pretty excited about. Oh, I probably should tell you something that's kind of, you know, glaring maybe to you. Maybe you have this big question, which is, what are these little guys on top? And these are airlocks. And I can show you here, like, in a normal lid, obviously, it's just glass, solid glass. In this lid, I'll show you this one, there's a hole and a little rubber gasket, and then you can actually take this airlock and put it in and out, and you fill it with water up to the fill line. And what that does is it prevents oxygen from going inside, and oxygen feeds mold and it feeds some other undesirable bacteria. And when you have the airlock on there, it allows for the carbon dioxide to come out, which is part of fermentation. You know, when you're fermenting, you actually create carbon dioxide as well as lactic acid. So that has room to escape now, because if you didn't have room for the carbon dioxide to go away, guess what would happen? This would explode. So that's really key for not having moldy ferments. It's really an easy way to keep the smell down in your house if you're fermenting a lot of stuff. And in general, I'm kind of a lazy cook is what I call myself. And so because of that, if I forget about something or forget to check on it, or if I'm traveling, which I do a lot, then now I know that I maybe have forgotten about it and left it longer than it should be without attendance, but it's doing just fine because it doesn't have any oxygen present. So that's just like something that I've really moved towards the more that I've been doing this. I really enjoy using airlocks. I just think it's more sanitary, it's easier to deal with, it messes up less often when you're forgetting about it. So that's what this is. And this is a company called Pickle It. Pickl-it. I love their products. I buy them, I use them. I think it's a really fantastic company because it's just so easy. And then the cool thing that they also have is they have these little rubber stoppers. So when this is done and it's ready to go in the fridge, which this one is just about done and ready to go in, I'm just going to take this out and I'm going to put the little rubber the rubber stopper right in there and then put it in the fridge. And I didn't even have to take it out and jar it. So it's a really handy invention that they have here. So it's patented and things like that as well. So there we have that. And if we have any questions, just feel free to like wave me down and ask away. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them and, you know, let me know what you're thinking about this video. Even if you're watching the recording, you know, we're live right now, but if you're watching this recording, I really would like to know what you have going on. What questions you have about ferments? What are you interested in fermenting? Because, you know, I'm going to make videos later on and we can always incorporate your ideas into future videos. All right, what else? We have pickled tomatoes, and these are pickled green tomatoes. I actually didn't make these myself. I bought these at the farmer's market from this really nice lady because I thought that this was beautiful. I love this blue jar and the really beautiful green tomatoes. And her little label, it's all handwritten. This is with their dill pickled green tomatoes, and she does this with vinegar. So this has vinegar to preserve the tomatoes. Now, most of what I do when I'm making fermented veggies involves naturally fermenting it and using the lactic acid instead of vinegar as the way to preserve them. Now, the lactic acid, I don't add lactic acid. I just, you know, do a natural lactic acid ferment, meaning I chop up veggies and then I add salt and I shove it down here into this crock, and the lactic acid is produced by the bacteria. And that's what's creating that natural antimicrobial preservative. There's so many goodies over here. This one is from my Facebook moderator. So in all my groups behind the scenes, gut rebuilding, my fermentation and certification program, my probiotic power cleanse, we have Fiona Siebel, and she has really delved into all kinds of fermentation. So she supports everybody on Facebook. When you come into my program, you can go on Facebook, you have your own private group, and everybody talks about what recipes they're making. They share pictures, videos, and really stay connected in that group. And so she sent these to me as a Christmas present. These are umi plums. It looks like a date, but it's not. It's a plum. Umi plum. It's a lacto ferment using these plums. And it's a very alkalinizing food, good for digestion. It's used in a lot of macrobiotic cooking. You can get an umi plum paste as well. There's a pit still inside of here, but they're sour and sweet at the same time. They're actually really delicious. It's just so cool that you can preserve this piece of fruit. And now I have this, and I can just leave it in a jar, even outside of the fridge if I want, as long as it's in a, you know, a cool spot in the house, like in my pantry, it's gonna be fine. How crazy is that, right? I'm always fascinated by this stuff, that we can use bacteria and let them do this work to like create food that lasts longer for us. You know, most of this was created and discovered before we even had refrigerators or ice boxes. So people had to figure out, how am I going to have this food in the winter when food is scarce? How am I going to, you know, get these nutrients? They didn't know they needed vitamin C, but they knew that their bodies craved certain foods in the winter. And if they went without them, their teeth would start falling out. They'd start having all these really horrible symptoms and eventually would get sick and die if they didn't get those nutrients right away. You have a question?
We have a question.
All right, ask away.
From Becky Shreve. She says that she recently tried fermenting cabbage with carrots. It was shredded fine and she let it go for 7 days. It tasted okay but smelled a little off, no mold or anything. Any ideas what she did wrong?
So I guess, so Becky, it's interesting because a lot of people will make fermented vegetables and say that it didn't turn out, when in fact it did. So I teach a lot of the ins and outs of this in the fermentation and certification program, like full on detail, like how to master it every time. But I'm just going to give you a little glimpse of what we talk about in there. So with a like finely, so she's saying cabbage was fine as well as the carrots.
Mm-hmm. It was shredded really fine.
Shredded really fine. That's great. So what I would say is, you know, after 7 days, sometimes is not long enough. Like this one's been fermenting for 2 months outside of the fridge. I like mine to go a little bit longer personally. And so that off smell, I don't know how off you mean. Like what did it smell like? So if you have room to write in the comments, do tell me a little bit more detail. Like what did it smell like? Was it so bad that you wouldn't want to taste it? And which part were you smelling? Were you smelling the top layer? Because my recommendation to really check and see how yours is doing is that you scrape off the top layer when you're about to try it and like see if this is ready to put in the fridge and ready to be, your final ferment. And then you want to scoot down about 2 inches into like the center of this ferment, like 2 inches down, and grab a piece of the vegetables from there. And then you're going to smell that. And at first, when it's freshly fermenting, it's like warm-ish, it's not in the fridge. Sometimes it can be an overwhelming smell for some people. But you don't want it to smell gross. Like it shouldn't smell like, I don't know, I just compare it to like, dirty humans. Like you don't want it to smell like gross, dirty humans. Like that's kind of what will end up happening here. It'll smell really just inedible. If it smells just sort of interesting, but still has those food, like savory scents to it, then, go ahead, just smell it, make sure it's, passing the smell test. And then from that point, I say taste it, chew it up a little bit, and then spit it out and just take a minute with that and taste it and see if there's any weird flavors on your tongue. What'd she say?
She said that she smelled the top, then all the way down, it all smelled the same. It smelled kind of musty.
Musty?
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I would scrape off the top layer. I would just taste a little bit and spit it out. You're going to be fine, but taste a little bit. See if it's sour. If it's not sour, don't eat it. It may need to go a little bit longer, honestly. 7 days is too soon for me. And then the other thing I would say is, okay, so with yours, 7 days, let it go for another week or 2 weeks first and just see if it changes. Push that top layer down, make sure it stays under the brine. And at that point, if it still smells musty, even down underneath the top layer, I would then transfer it to the fridge and just let it sit in the fridge for 24 hours and then see how it tastes. Because sometimes just putting it in the fridge will change the overall flavor composition. But it could have been a salt issue, and you'll need to taste it just to see. So that's going to be the key component here. Smell it, taste it a little bit. How sour is it? How salty is it? That's what you want to know. Because sometimes you may have not added enough salt, or you may have added too much salt and it inhibited some of the growth of bacteria. All right, so I hope that's helpful. I hope that helps you problem solve it. Most people are taking fermented veggies that are not bad and throwing them away because they don't realize that's part of the natural process. So remember that piece too. Like push it a little bit until you see something mold and stinky and gross. Like keep playing with it. Let it hang out on your counter a little bit longer and just watch and see what it does, because that's part of your learning process.
We have another question from Charlotte Keeler. She said, I'm using a ginger bug for fermenting fruits and fruit juices. Is it normal for the bug to get gloopy?
Yes, it is normal for the bug to get gloopy. I mean, that can definitely happen. And I'm assuming you mean gloopy, like kind of viscous. Yeah, I mean, when you add more substrate, more food for it to eat, it should be fine. I mean, if you add a bunch of ginger juice to it and let that ferment, like how does it go? I'm assuming that probably would make a really good, healthy ginger beer. Yeah, as long as it smells good, and has a good taste, you should be fine. All right, let's look at something else here on the table. I think I am going to show you a SCOBY. Haha. So this here is June, J-U-N, June. It's actually related to kombucha, except with this you use green tea and honey. With kombucha, you never want to use honey unless it's been pasteurized and heated and all the bacteria have been killed off. But this is June, and it has the same SCOBY. SCOBY is an acronym. It stands for Symbiotic Community of Bacteria and Yeasts. And this one is huge. I think I'm just gonna go for it and show you guys this baby up close. I always call some people call these mothers, some people call them babies. I like to call them baby mamas. Look how large this got. Like, I wish that you guys could feel this. For anybody who hasn't felt, you're gonna put a plate under it. Oh, you're so nice, thank you. Look at that. This feels like
Fat.
It looks like a blob of fat. It feels like really hard Jello. Like if you were to let a Jello like somehow get hard and dehydrated, because it has that like silky, glistening feel of Jello. Just look at that. And see those little brown spots? Those are normal. Those are some like yeast byproduct. Anyway, this is June, and there's more scobies in there. So that's the new SCOBY. Like down here, this is the one that I was given. And this SCOBY made all of that. So the yeasts that are in here make this cellulose. That's what this is. This is cellulose. And it makes it in layers. I don't know if you can see how these all separate into these layers because it's constantly adding more and more and more. So I just think it's cool. This makes a sour tea that's supposed to be pretty good for you. Again, I think of June very similar to kombucha. I think for people with major gut dysbiosis, it's often not the best thing, but for people who are relatively healthy, or even, I think gout, strangely enough, is one disease that tends to get kind of broken up from these kinds of beverages. Having like a 4-ounce shot or even a 1-ounce shot before your meal to help boost digestion. It starts stimulating digestive juices because of the acids. I'm gonna rinse off my hands here.
We have another question.
Yeah, what's your question?
From Melissa Meadows, it says, do you recommend slightly cooking fresh beets before fermenting?
I personally don't do it that way, but I think they're tasty when they have been cooked first. I mean, I like them when they're really soft like that. They're cooked and then fermented. I think it's good. But I think you also risk it not fermenting. Like you have to make sure that, you know, if I'm going to do one with it cooked, I would make sure and add, honest to God, even just a little bit of the peel from one of the beets to get the bacteria in there, because you're going to add a brine and cover it with a saltwater brine. And I would put just a couple pieces of peel so the bacteria comes in and can create a lot of acids to really preserve it and make it sour. Beets are really tricky when it comes to fermenting them because there's so much sugar that they're really easy to mold. So when you're making it, it's a shorter ferment. Generally, leave it on the counter for like 2 to 3 days, maybe 4 or 5 days tops in cooler environment. And I, for those, would always use an airlock. Yeah, but generally when I'm making beets, I usually chop them up into like thin slices, and I make a beet kvass that way. I can only stand so much. Like I can't eat beet kvass all day, every day. Like it's so strong. To me, it's a little more of like an elixir. I'll do a shot of it, or have just a little bit of the beets on the side as a condiment. That one's really, really strong for me. Let's show off. Oh, I know what we can do. The miso. So we just made this miso last week, and oh, it's just so cool. This is a red miso. These are using pinto beans, and the rice that you see in there is koji. That's the starter culture. That's what has the mycelium on it. And I'm actually just gonna I'm gonna take care of this. This is what I would do. So I'm gonna show you what I would do. This is a week later. This is a really cool jar too. It's like perfect. It's got these little straight sides. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna press this down a little bit. I want to get some of the air bubbles out of here that are being created. And I don't know if you could see these like air spaces around the beans. Those air spaces are being created by carbon dioxide as everything is fermenting. But I don't want air spaces to appear, because the air spaces mean that oxygen could actually make its way down in here and make this whole thing mold. And when you're dealing with beans and you're trying to ferment beans like just on your counter, beans hanging out, it's gonna be really hard to get those to not mold, right? I mean, it's a protein. There's so much that rotting bacteria can like go in and feast on and make it just really disgusting. And when you get beans to rot, it's just putrid. I actually had some beans in my fridge. They weren't that old, but I threw them away. And this was just last week. And I threw them away in this garbage can under the counter. And I came in my house and I was like, wow, stinks. And it was just the next day. And they weren't even that bad when I took them out. But man, I mean, just sitting in my house for one day, like, it was disgusting. So just a reminder that like when you're messing with things like miso, I mean, I think miso is one of the most complex ferments to make. There's many, many steps. Most of them are pretty unusual for us in our everyday lives, unless you grew up eating miso or being around people who made it. It's, it's a little trickier. There's things that you use to make it that just aren't part of, they weren't part of my life growing up. I never had heard of koji. I didn't even know what that was. And just the thought of leaving beans out, I mean, seriously, like, it goes against my entire nature until now. Oh, this is so good. I'm glad I pushed this down. So that's really going to help just solidify this. So on the very top layer, I have a piece of parchment paper that's just, kind of keeping an airlock on there. And then I'm just going to put this lid back on and let this go for another 9 years. I'm just kidding. I don't think it will last that long. I'll eat it before then, but you can let these ferment for 9 years. I mean, probably more. I bet there's misos in Japan that have been going for 100 years. I mean, I can't imagine why not. This little weck jar is so super cool if I could get this to work. It has these clips, so it just clips on. I'm gonna do it this way. There we go. Boom. Clip it on. I hope. Okay, maybe I should do this later when I'm not messing it up. There we go. Clip it on. Clip it on. And that just holds it on. And air can still go out of this. So that's the nice thing about the weck jar. All right, what's next? This little guy, this big guy. This is watermelon radish kimchi, folks. I'm just gonna rinse my hands because I don't want to put the miso, like any bacteria that might have been in the miso, I don't want to put that in this kimchi. They're not the same kind of ferments. One's a mold ferment and one is a bacterial ferment. So I'd like to keep that a little bit separate. So I don't know if you can tell, I'm going to show this a little bit closer. I want you to just notice though how the top layer is slightly different color. It's like looking a little more brown than this like gorgeous pink color at the bottom. That's natural. That top layer will often oxidize because there is a little bit of oxygen touching it there even when the airlock's on, and now I'm introducing oxygen. One way to make that stop is to like continually push it down and keep that top layer really exposed to the brine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to grab a piece from further down. This is a little spicy. So, all right. So there's a lot of paste in here. It's so good. You want to try it? Here, you try this one. Whoa. I love how you're like,
That's amazing.
I want to try it. You're like whispering it.
I have no shame.
Corinne's here helping me out with this, y'all.
It's so good, guys. It is delicious.
It's spicy.
Beautiful and delicious.
But it's not too spicy, you know? So I made these thin slices of radish. That's crazy good. That's like unacceptably good.
That's so good.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Ginger, garlic, onion, red chili flake. Lots of red chili flake. Whew. That's good. Watermelon radish is beautiful. They're like hot pink inside. And that's why I fermented with it, honestly. It was just purely because of the color. I wanted to see what would happen. And I'm really pleased. Actually, I want to show you. I'm not quite done here. Like, you see that air bubble that I kind of left here? When I pulled out those pieces, it's actually better. And you can do this with a spoon, you can do it with your hand, you can use a metal spoon, or a wooden spoon. People get really like freaked out, like, oh, you can't put metal in ferments. I've never had it cause any problems. You're not leaving the metal in there, you're just touching it for a second. It's not staining it, it's fine. But one real key thing, like you saw what I did with the miso, was just level it out, right? Like really focus on getting the air bubbles out, getting it pushed down. That's kind of what you want to do even after you've tried one of your ferments. You want to go ahead and put it, or push all the air bubbles out and get it level again. This one's ready to go in the fridge. So I'm probably, because this is such a large size, I'm probably going to take this and put it in separate small jars, and I'll probably give some to my mom and to some other folks. But I could put, what?
I was just like, me.
Oh, I could give it to you. I could give it to you. And then I could put the rubber stopper in here and just put it in the fridge like this, but I don't want to eat all this by myself. I want to share it with some folks. And the recipe for this is also going to be in my book that's coming out this year. So keep your eye out. I mean, you know, if you go to summerbach.com and you enter your email in to get my top recommended ferment, if you go do that, you're going to get on my email list. I will make sure and send out a notice about that book being released so that you can get access to these recipes and you can make this stuff at home yourself. All right, what's next? Let me show you the okra. This is lacto fermented as well, just like the kimchi, just like the carrots. Now, I am in the South. I love okra. Okra is a big part of our lives here. But I'm not a big fan of fried food. I really don't like fried food, to be honest with you. It's just not my favorite thing. Some people would disown me as friends if they heard me say that down here. But that's just how I feel. I don't love fried food. It just sits too heavy for me. I just don't feel like, it just slows me down, and it's a long time before I can eat again when I eat fried food, and I don't want to wait that long in between eating. There's a lot of garlic slices in here. I took okra and added a saltwater brine over it and made okra pickles. These are straight up okra pickles. They're crunchy, they're delicious, and quite honestly, this is my new favorite way to eat okra. So, as you can see, it's a little okra pickle. They're so good. And okra is amazing. It's a prebiotic. I mean, okra has some of the best source of inulin. It's got great prebiotics that feed the good bacteria in your gut. You want to get it in your body, but when you make a ferment with it, it's like double duty. You've got both the probiotics and the inulin in there. So this is a great one. It's really mucilaginous, so it's also soothing for the digestive tract for people with leaky gut and things like that. All right. Hey, everybody. Hey, Emily. Hey, Heather. Nice. Okay, so what else do we have here? I showed you the carrots, the pickled carrots, and I showed you the jun, which is like kombucha. I showed you the watermelon radish kimchi. I just shared the okra pickles, delicious. This is our coriander sauerkraut, and then the miso over here. So, also kind of explain these were green tomatoes that are pickled in vinegar that I didn't make, and then there's the umi plums. Amazing. You don't see these every day. What else do I have next? I think I'll show you this Mama Jamma. Okay, this is, let's move this. Let's really give it its own show because this one's real special, you guys. This is my red wine vinegar. Whew, that is strong. Okay, so red wine vinegar is very similar to the jun. It uses a SCOBY. Oh, look at this SCOBY. It's dyed red from the wine. And I don't know if you can see this, so I'm gonna show this to you all the way around. Actually, here, I'm gonna show you a couple things. So I'm gonna come around to your side so that you can really see this up close. Let's see, all right, look. Do you see that? That's the SCOBY. It's so crazy. All right, cool. And then I want to show you one more thing, which is this. Do you see how there's SCOBYs up and down that entire jar? there's literally scobies. There's like 20 scobies in here, and they're all in these layers together. So pretty awesome. I pour all my red wine remnants from my house in here, and I just keep feeding it. And then when I make like soups, or I'm making greens especially, I just use this little spigot, and I put a little bowl under here, and I get a little bit of red wine vinegar, and that's what I add to my food. It's delicious. In my opinion, this is the best vinegar I have ever tasted. There is something to say about making food at home and making ferments at home. The ones that you make at home, I don't know what it is. The miso I make at home, my sauerkraut, the red wine vinegar, like, they are delicious. They taste nothing like what you can buy in the store. The only exception I'll say to that for some people is that you might be, depending on how good you are at making sauerkraut, you might find better sauerkraut at the store. So you got to learn how to get really good at the sauerkraut. But miso, red wine vinegar, all of these other ones, they just taste so amazing when you make them yourself.
We have a couple questions
Ooh.
about the fermented okra.
Okay.
One from Melissa that's saying, where do we get that recipe for the okra?
Well, I put that recipe in the book that's coming out. So I actually can't release that recipe until the book gets published.
Cool.
So
all these you can find.
Yeah, you
in
just
the new book.
get on my email list, go to summerbach.com, get your ebook, The Top Fermented Food That I Recommend. You get on my email list, and I'll send you notice as soon as that comes out. See, I can't divulge it yet. I guess I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, just showing you guys, but I'm so excited.
And then another question from Becky asking, how long did the okra ferment?
The okra has been fermenting since November, and it's February right now. So, I mean, 4 months really. Mm-hmm. 3.5 months, I guess, at this point. Yeah, 3.5 months.
So would you say the longer the better, or just depends for fermenting?
You know, that kind of depends. You really just, there's a perfect sweet spot, and that sweet spot is different for different people. When people are just starting out eating sauerkraut and making their own lacto ferments, oftentimes, you know, I say they might want to have a little bit younger ferment, so maybe 2 weeks instead of the 4 weeks that I would do, or the 2 months that I would do, or the 3 months in this case that I would do with the carrots and the okra. Like, when you're just starting out, sometimes it's just too sour, it's too intense. So yeah, I would say longer isn't necessarily better, but it does use up more of the sugars that way, and you end up with a more stable microbial community with the lacto ferments. With miso, longer is always better. It's amazing how much like a year difference makes. The longest I've ever let miso go was for 3 years, and that was hard because I had all these jars that I made at the same time, and each year I would eat another jar. And every year it got tastier and tastier because the longer it goes, it just keeps getting these more subtle flavors. And then with red wine vinegar, once it turns to vinegar, it doesn't go any further. It just kind of stops. And then there are some ferments, like grain ferments, like idlis and injera. And those are short ferments. Like, you can't go too long. It'll ruin it. So yeah, timing really depends on the exact ferment. And I think there is a sweet spot for most of them.
So maybe for our last one, we could do a little intro to the chaparral oil, since we're going to be getting a video about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, so you might notice on this table there's a couple things. There's dehydrated grapefruit, which I made a whole bunch of grapefruit salt to add to some of my ferments. So instead of just plain salt, I was adding grapefruit salt. So I had dried these and just put them up here for decoration. And we also have this. So I don't know if this is chaparral. This is my favorite herb on the planet. I just went on my road trip, and we were in the Southwest, and I harvested a bunch of this, and I made chaparral oil. So we're not going to go into this in detail right now, but I will show you because it's sitting here on the table with everything. This is my chaparral oil, and it's an antifungal oil. It's great for candida, like fungal nail infections. It's great for like dandruff and itchy skin, you know, any kind of fungus on the skin. And in general, if you have candida inside, I find it's really good to put it on the outside too, because it helps normalize the pH on your skin. So I'm going to teach how to do that in an upcoming YouTube video. So make sure you go to youtube.com/fermentationist and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll get edited, produced Really great how-to videos and content there.
So maybe one more question from
One
Melissa. Melissa, we love your questions.
We love your questions.
If you can't get organic veggies to ferment, is it okay to use conventional?
Okay, so if you can't get your hands on organic, it is okay to use conventional. I mean, what choice do you have? You know, I'd rather you ferment and get something fermenting in your house and get some probiotics in you. Some people think that the conventional ones may not ferment as well, but I think I've never done a side-by-side experiment to tell. But it's possible. I mean, they're gonna have a slightly different array of microbes on the outside, so it might depend a little bit there. But I know lots of people that have gone through the fermentationist certification program, and they only had access to conventionally grown vegetables. That's what they used, and they didn't have any problems. All right, we good? Okay. Thanks everybody for joining me on this Facebook Live. I hope you had a blast checking out all these amazing ferments, and I hope that you get a chance to start experimenting with this stuff. So stay in touch and keep asking questions. If you're watching this recording, let me know what you have. We're gonna keep writing them down and answer them in future videos. All right, love you guys. See you later.